All right. Welcome everybody to Master Your Life podcast. We have a good friend of mine and a guest, Miki Furman, all the way from the six. We're hitting it up twice now. This is the recap. Let's welcome my friend. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me back. It's been like a year pretty much, so I feel like it's a anniversary type thing now. You know?
100%. 100%. You know a little bit about Mickey. He's been in the mortgage and lending game since 2006. Now also as a realtor as well. He plays with a curiosity mindset. Anybody that follows his page, you can see he thinks outside of the box and he's always looking for the answers. His podcast, his Instagram name is once again Cents to Dollars, correct?
Yeah, so it's at cents to dollars.
Dollars. There you go. And he's always making, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make dollars. There
Exactly.
you go, right? So Mickey, tell me a little bit about yourself, about what you've been up to since 2006, how you got into the lending industry. Let's break it down.
Well, to tell you the truth, like every other kid growing up in Toronto, I dreamt of growing up to be a mortgage broker.
100%.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I wanted to get into sports. And then as I got older, I was like, you know what? This doesn't seem like it's going to work out for me. But the way it actually happened, to be honest, it was kind of serendipitous. And pretty much it wasn't something that I had planned. I was about 18 years old. I was job hunting. If you remember, like Workopolis, do you remember that website?
Yeah. We're the same gen. We're the same gen.
Yeah. So you get what I'm saying, because I say that to some people and they're like,
100.
yeah, they don't know what I'm talking about. But basically,
The old Indeed, I guess,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So at the time when I was looking, I previously worked at a telemarketing company. So I had some exposure to being on the phone, doing sales. And initially, when I had got into sales, I found it pretty difficult. And then over time, getting comfortable, I started to get better. And I realized that I was actually pretty good at this and I had an ability to speak and communicate. So I'm sitting on Workopolis one day and I come across this job ad for this company called HSBC Finance. I'm sure you remember last time we spoke, you mentioned you were at
Absolutely.
Citi.
HSBC.
So, so a lot of the newer gen people in this business, they probably don't remember that. But I had no idea what it was. I was literally 18. I saw it. I read the description. It's like you get to wear a tie, you got to show up, you got to talk shit on the phone. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's me. And
It's like a boiler room feeling, probably, right?
yeah, exactly. Literally, right? Because that's the stuff I grew up on. I'm like, oh
Yes.
shit, this is kind of the same vibe. So I apply without any real like experience, at least not in finance. I didn't go to school for it. It wasn't something that I knew much about. I didn't know anything about interest rates and debt, or let alone subprime mortgages, for example, which is exactly what this place was. And for one reason or another, and you mentioned mentality earlier, and of course, curiosity is a big part of my mentality, but more than that, I like this idea of faking it till you make it. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to completely fake it and get into places that you absolutely don't belong in. But what it means to me is you want to sort of at least envision yourself doing the thing that you may want to do, but have yet to do. And that's kind of where I was at. So they called me in for an interview. They started asking me a bunch of questions. I did my best to sort of answer as calculated as possible. And somehow they hired me. And next thing I knew, it was like summer 2006, like peak subprime era. And I'm out there slinging high interest rate mortgages and loans. And it was wild. It was wild because, and I'll just touch on this quick, but I think people have this attachment to product when they're in sales, at least some people, and they sort of think to themselves, like, I need the best product in order to move the product. And I learned from that experience that's not absolutely the case at all, like completely not the case. What you need to know is how to deliver, and you need to be able to demonstrate value. And if you can do that, you can actually close people on things. And so I did that for a few years. And fast forward to 2008, I was like 20, 21-ish at that time. And, because I'm working at this space, like I had no knowledge of mortgages and finance. So my only sort of background education towards it was CNBC, to be honest. Just watching that shit all the time.
Yeah.
And shout out to Jim Cramer. And watching it, and they're talking about this monster subprime financial collapse that's unfolding in the US and it's spreading into Canada. And I was there. I was in the belly of the beast. I witnessed it. We were doing crazy things. And at that point, I was like, man, I need to find a way out of this. This corporate shit's not for me. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of firing of people for no reason besides not hitting quotas, stuff like that. And 2009 specifically-ish is when I would say became an independent mortgage agent. I've been in it ever since, like the mafia, man. Once you're in, there's no getting out, you know?
That's it, eh? Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what? I remember with Citigroup when I was working there originally in about 2006 as well. That's when I really was able to kind of touch upon my sales skills and also financing. Of course,
Mhm.
later on, I was able to hone them in a little bit better. But I remember interest rates back then in the high 20s
Yeah.
for the for from Citigroup exact from them.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought that was just normal to me because I just came into the industry basically fresh out of high school thinking, yeah, this is just the way it is.
We have
And
a similar story. It's kind of trippy, no?
it's so trippy. And
Same.
I was thinking, okay, yeah, you know, you're gonna sign here, and I would explain the value. The clients already knew it. It's not something that we were pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. It's completely
Yeah,
transparent. But that was at that time. But consider,
exactly.
imagine that nowadays, those type of rates, that'd be ridiculous. Of course, prospectively, prices have tripled or if not quadrupled. So it's very similar, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's amazing, man. You've had a history for almost 2 decades in the lending space, coming up on 2 decades. Uh, what do you feel like was one of your most pivotal or most challenging times? Of course, 2008, but outside of that, in terms of business, or how did you use some of those times to, get better?
Yeah, so I'll give you a story and maybe it'll resonate with some. I'm kind of exposing myself here, but fuck it, I'll break
That's
the news
okay.
on your podcast. So back to that 2008 era, things were getting pretty shaky and scary. You know, you'd get into the office and I'm sure you remember and they'd call these meetings and the branch manager at the time was like on a day by day calling in my buddies and coworkers into these meetings and going over quotas and stuff. So I'm like, I got to get out of this. And at that exact same time, a good childhood friend of mine, his mom was in the independent mortgage space. And so I was like, okay, I want to branch out, but it's very different working for one specific lender. Like when you're with an HSBC or a city, you always know where the placement's going to go, right? Right?
Absolutely.
Like on a profile basis. When you get into the broker world, all of a sudden it's all these different options, and you're responsible to sort of know what fits and what belongs. It's almost like you're constantly trying to figure out how to put the pieces of a puzzle together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hit up my buddy. He was doing admin work for his mom and her partner at the time. And at that very moment, before I kind of left, so the last place I was at was Wells Fargo Financial. I'd gone from HSBC. I went over to Wells, just better options, whatnot. And so I took a lot of the clients with me. I
Mm-hmm.
printed things off. And essentially, I had a lot of clients that I had basically kind of went on this path of trying to redeem myself for the quote unquote dirt that I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I've done.
Yeah.
A little bit of a financial assassin at those some prime places.
Yes.
Like now I could offer real value. But what happened was I ran out of those clients, obviously. Like within the
Mm-hmm.
first year, fantastic. But after that, I was like, fuck, what do I do? How do I
Mm-hmm.
get business? And so pivoting and learning how to market, how to reach an audience, how to sort of separate myself from other agents and brokers. So other agents and brokers, I found at least in the independent space, the ones that were used to having prime products and bank lenders and stuff like that, they always stood on the product. 90 to 95% of their pitch had to do with the product, and very little of it had to do with them actually delivering and finding, I guess you could say, value, right? So
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like when we got into that business back then, because we had high rates, so we had no product. What we had to have was a combination of personality
Yep.
and also a way to sort of deliver information where the person could say, ah, okay, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I grasped pretty fast when I was just dealing with the open market was that you could actually communicate with people in a way where you don't have to talk about the product. The last question people were asking me was interest rate. What the first thing was to identify the need, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, hey, do you want a lower interest rate? Because fundamentally, I don't think people have enough financial literacy to really understand the difference. We're a
Mm-hmm.
payment driven society. When you say the rate is 4% or 2%, what does that really mean besides having the ability to kind of, like make fun of your neighbor and say, ha, I got a better rate. But besides
Yeah.
that, the average Canadian, the average consumer doesn't really fundamentally know the difference. And so when you take that mentality of like, I don't have product, but I need to deliver value and I need to have personality in that process, that's what I realized was a pivotal moment for me in the mortgage business for sure.
So you were
And
able to
separating.
catapult that, use that to catapult that, leverage that part of yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it wasn't easy and like everything else in life, and we kind of touched on this the last time we did this, but like life is going to be a combination of ups and downs. It's the long-term game that you have to focus on, and that persistence is going to be tested. And that persistence will only work for you if you have something in mind that you're truly after. If you're in a situation where you're like, I need to figure this out. I need to make ends meet. I need to succeed. You'll find a way. And that's the situation I would say I was in back then.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you were in a position like throwing yourself in the fire, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man.
How do you feel about that? People throwing themselves in the fire in a skill. You think it's good for them, or what do you think? Of
I
course, I
think
guess you're gonna say
absolutely.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it sounds cliche, but like I'll give you a different example outside of the world of mortgages. Like take you, for example, you're doing content now. You're sitting there, we're talking digitally. This is going to go out to a bunch of people are going to see this, right? Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. A lot of people,
Thousands,
thousands, hundreds of thousands. So,
millions.
millions. So imagine for a second, I was to say, hey, you got to go on stage and have a talk in front of like 100 people, 1,000 people. That would be scary shit.
Absolutely.
Content to me, same thing. Terrifying because you don't know what the reaction is going to be. We're always criticizing and judging ourselves. But the truth is, the more you fail, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more you start to realize, like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Everybody fails. Everybody has to take a step back to take two step forwards. And at the end of the day, there's no better to refine your skills, no better way to refine your skill set than to just try things that are new and foreign.
Absolutely, man. You know, it's I started learning over the past few years. I'm not special, right? And that was a way for me to humble myself and also push myself. Because
Yeah,
if I the more I start feeling like, oh, I'm this or I'm that, I kind of critique myself a bit more. When I don't, I'm like, I'm not special. I'll put out whatever I want to put out. And if people like it, great. If not, great. At least I did something that I wasn't able to do before, right?
absolutely.
That's awesome, man. So financial literacy, I know you're a big proponent and trying to advocate for that and try to help out your viewers and your clients, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. You and I both also share that same drive as well. What do you think somebody, let's just say, whether you're 18, 50, 55, 70, where do you think somebody should begin when they want to start digging a little bit deeper? Where should they start?
In terms of, so that's a really good question. And believe it or not, I think we live in a time right now where information is more accessible than ever. Your
Absolutely.
cell phone right now that you carry in your pocket with a Wi-Fi or actual internet connection, whatever each ever case, today can give you more information in real time that you can consume than any time in history before. And if you're somebody that understands that, and again, this is why the curious mentality matters, because if you're not seeking answers to questions, whether you find them immediately or not, but if you're not looking to understand the world around you and the different layers that it has, you're not going to be able to truly see the potential that exists. Meaning, for example, once you start to understand things from a financial literacy perspective, you can maneuver and you'll find that life becomes a lot less resistant and you can get further with the limited energy that you have. Same thing can be applied with psychology, whether it's sales, whether it's interpersonal relationships, virtually anything. And so if somebody out there that's listening and wants to take that first step, and this applies to anything, again, financial literacy, psychology, mathematics,
Mhm.
physics, whatever the case is, in my opinion, their ability to find those answers exists. They can go to places like YouTube. There's a lot of content creators these days that focus on things like, creating courses, for instance,
Yep.
spending money to get that level of product. And obviously, you want to do some research before you buy anything. It's amazing because we're no longer tied to the educational system that's offered by the government or whatever country we live in. Now we can create an a la carte sort of educational platform for ourselves based on what's out there. So let your curiosity lead and go find the answers to whatever you seek.
There you go, man. I love how you put that. And you know what I noticed as well? I was sitting down with a few clients a couple of weeks ago, and they're probably in their mid 40s. And I sat down with them. First thing I said to them was, hey, guys, if you have any questions, there's no stupid questions here. If there's something you don't know, please ask me up front. I will be happy to answer them for you because a lot of this stuff wasn't taught in school. And the clients, their guard just came down. They're like, you know what? We do have these questions for XYZ. Can you please help answer this? Because we felt silly for asking this because we're at a certain age. We should know by now. And
Mhm.
I said to him, like, what makes you think you should know by now just based off of age? Your age doesn't dictate what you're going to know in the financial industry unless you've been applying yourself. So that's the unfortunate thing about, I guess, people as a mass. I noticed that just because you're a certain age, you think you better know it by now. So that stops people from even trying. So and another thing,
100%.
yeah, exactly. You see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it applies to so many different things. And I like the way you said that. And, I think a lot of it has to do with ego and one's ability to not want to take either criticism or be wrong. But that's silly. The world is massive. The amount of information that exists within reality is probably almost infinite. And our ability in this little short period of time that we have here to grasp it is also limited. But I think we need to start getting comfortable with not knowing things. Instead of wanting to be the smartest in the room, we should start considering being the dumbest in the room and learning from those around us, as long as we're putting ourselves in the right rooms. And you mentioned something along the lines of, I should know this and I should know that. But you're right. The educational system hasn't really caught up to modern times. There's a lot of things personally I think that should be instilled in education, like in a very almost fundamental level, almost like that it has to be part of the curriculum,
Mhm.
whether it's financial literacy, I think computer engineering, like coding, things like that. Whatever the current demands of the marketplace are, those are the basics that need to be taught to create a bridge from the education aspect to the employment aspect. And there's a big disconnect. And more than anything, I think what you're good at, what I'm gathering, and why we're able to do this and it feels cool and free is because the number one secret is to see yourself in someone else. When I
Mhm.
start to see myself in you through empathy, but also realizing like he's wants the same shit that I do.
Yeah.
Most of us want the same shit. And because we want the same shit, that then means I could see more of myself in you versus differences. And then I could just speak openly and say, hey, you know what? I know that this is your business. This is what you do. I do something else. If you want to know about, electricity, like, because I'm an electrician, let's just say,
Yeah.
come talk to me. But when it comes to this shit, I don't know it. So you're my guy. That's cool. Not a big
Yeah.
deal, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? We could be the guys that you call on, so to speak,
Yeah,
for that advice. Cause you know what? That's what you quote unquote not pay us for, but that's what we're here for, right?
absolutely.
Um, okay, that's great. Let's move on to the next one. Let's see. All right. So we're basically entrepreneurs, so to speak, right? Whether
Mhm.
you're in real estate mortgages or any sort of entrepreneurship or business ownership. How do you think somebody should process dealing with rejection when they first become an entrepreneur? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. So I'll give you a personal experience. And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I know you've been in sales and you've been a phone guy for a while, right? Going back to the city days. And back
Yeah.
then, I think obviously we got into the business. It was difficult at first because it was foreign. Then we got comfortable. So then it became second nature. But after a while, at least for myself, I started to get a little bit of phone anxiety, if I'm being real, because I got used to getting inbound calls and I wasn't doing many outbound calls and I wasn't realizing this. And this went on for a while. And obviously, this limits my bottom line, which is
Mhm.
dumb. But when I wanted to go back to outbound calls because I wasn't used to it, I started realizing like shit, like I lost that armor that I had built up of being comfortable with rejection. And the
Mhm.
best thing that you could do that I've started to do recently is kind of like a fuck around mentality, meaning you don't want to find out when you fuck around, obviously, but you want to just fuck around
You
and see
try new
what.
things, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
meaning just like don't be attached to outcome. You want to stay as detached as possible. The truth is, if you're your authentic self, if you do what you believe in your heart and soul is the right thing, if you're a good person, and if you have good intentions behind your actions, ultimately, I think the universe will create some sort of alignment and your path will open up for you. But that requires you being comfortable with taking chances, getting rejected, and it's all good because anybody that's ever done something, the first thing they're going to tell you is like, I'm not special. I was just really good with getting rejected. Whether it's like the KFC guy. Are you familiar with that story, by the
Yeah,
way?
Colonel Sanders.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
dude, that guy got rejected, I think, like 1,000 literal times. Like, this is the story that Tony Robbins always
To
references.
like 65 or something.
Or some shit. Yeah. He
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
old and he should have hung it up. And it's like, dude, your chicken shit's not working out. Like, let's move on or whatever. But it worked. And that's the truth. You just
Yeah.
have to be persistent and you have to actually want it. And the greatest gift in life is failure because
Yeah.
you can learn from it. There's always a lesson, always, you know?
Absolutely. 100% agree. Because I know I've had the privilege to work with some very successful people. And I find, and I'm sure you have as well, I find connecting with them sometimes is more of an authentic conversation. They're going to be real. They're going to say it like it is because they're confident and
Yeah.
they've gone through the ringer a few times, like you and I have. So
Yeah.
when you're connecting with somebody, you're just going to be real and straight up. And people don't
Absolutely.
like it. Great, they move on. But a lot of times, people will kind of move to your frequency as well. Either they elevate
Absolutely.
to your frequency and you could carry them forward. I find it takes a lot of energy for me specifically to kind of fake it all the like not fake it to make it till you become it, right? And
Yes.
then you just basically proceed with it. That's
But
what I think you should do.
I also think, sorry to interrupt, I
No,
also
no.
think so the fake it till you make it thing is more so regarding the path and vision that you have.
Yes.
I don't think you as an individual, in terms of your personality and who you are, needs to be fake. If anything, you should be maximum authentic, be your true self, because there's people that are going to observe it. You're not going to be for everybody, right? Like I was just like
I
back
want
to
to
the
be though. I want to be for
I know,
everybody.
me too, trust me. But bro, I was just watching like Joe Rogan, for
Yeah.
example, and you know, content is scary because you're so exposed. The world out there is literally watching, and it's crazy because it's usually somebody taking a shit, watching something that you spent hours like I
I
put
hope
hours
they
in.
really like this.
Yeah, I hope they really like it. And they're literally just scrolling, taking a shit, whatever. But then you start to realize, like, you know what, man? Like Joe Rogan has haters.
Oh,
Joe Rogan. So like,
I
who
know
cares?
some. The funny thing is, I
Do
know
you?
some. They're like, I hate his voice. I'm like, what?
Out of
That's how
all
you had to come
things.
up with his voice.
Or they hate that he doesn't have like firm positions, which is another weird thing to me. That's a lot of ego. Like things change with information. It's a sign of intelligence to be able to evolve in position, unless it's super fundamental, you know?
100%. Yeah, that's interesting because I can say that I've evolved over the years, and I'm sure you have. From the
For sure.
person you were in 2006, you pivoted in 2008 because you said, you know
Yeah.
what, I can't do this. I want to provide different value for my clients, and I'm
Mhm.
sure you've been elevating and I guess elevating and changing yourself as the years progress. I think that's the whole point of life, to grow, right, and
Exactly.
evolve. Can't be
Absolutely.
stagnant, right?
No,
You know what? There's so many things we could talk about
I
here.
know.
All right,
I know.
so have you ever encountered any significant setbacks in your whether your personal life, business, that that kind of rocked you a bit?
Oh yeah. Too many to count,
I
bro.
figured like maybe one. It's like,
No, no, dude.
what was
I've
that
been
like, and what was that like, and how that changed you as a person? Like, what was that experience, and how that changed you as a person?
so I know everybody likes to point to one pivotal moment. I would say that life is a combination of multiple moments at different levels of sort of magnitude. I do think that in a way life is very cyclical, meaning that we are here to, like, I'm gonna get spiritual and weird for a
Oh,
second.
do it, bro.
Okay,
You
okay.
know I'm all about that.
I
Let's do
love
it.
that. See, that's why we connect, because you're real like that.
100%.
But the truth is, like we said, right? We're here to grow, we're here to evolve, but that happens through evolutions because it's in the word.
Mhm.
So evolutions means that you go up, you go down, you circle back, and you take another step. Like you're able to rise above it. Now you've entered another level. It's like a video game. And so
Absolutely.
that means life is going to have a variety of setbacks and things sprinkled across the board. And, you know, it's funny. My grandma always used to say this to me, and it never made sense to me as a kid. But, you know, she used to say that life is like a zebra. It's just black and white in the sense that you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. And when you have a bad day, just know that the good day is around the corner. And I was like, yeah, come on. Like, this is the end of the world. This is the worst. You know, there's nothing
Yes.
worse than this. And then a couple years later, something worse happened. And I'm like, oh shit, I kind of missed that. That wasn't that bad compared to this. So that's life. But then the part of growth that everybody needs to remember and focus on that's going to get us to where we truly belong, because I think everybody has a place that they belong in. I think there is a destiny for everybody based on a certain level of potential that exists for each of us individually. But basically, when those bad times happen, as you go through life and you encounter them multiple times over, which will happen, and the second you start to change your mindset and you're like, you know what? That happened. Okay. Instead of complaining and sort of attaching myself to it, I'm going to peel away the lesson. I'm going to understand why that happened. I'm going to analyze a little bit and I'm going to pick it apart, and then I'm not going to repeat it. And when the second you do that and you sort of open it as a welcoming thing, like a to
Mhm.
me versus, sorry, when it's a for me, right? Tony Robbins, when it's happening
Yes.
for me versus to me, it all becomes good, because the bad's no longer bad. It's just like another step on the path to good. And
Mhm.
again, it's cliche sounding. I get it. And it seems like I have all the answers. I do not. The hard part for me, and I can 1000% guess and say the same for you, is the emotions attached to it. That part's the struggle, right? When you go through those bad moments, when you're in the eye of the hurricane, you're like, fuck, like this is bad. But it's the mindset thing. People like us, I think, the ones that are a little bit more connected, we have to really have those self talks. The story you tell yourself is essentially what your life is going to look like. If I'm telling myself life is shit, then I'm going to see the shit in it. But if it's good,
100%.
then I'll see the good in it, you know?
Absolutely, man. And that reminds me of a quote that Mike Tyson said not too long ago. I
Mhm.
think it was along the lines of life is a journey, it has its tests, and without the test, there's no testimony. So
Exactly. That's good.
it's
I
yeah,
like
and
that.
I mean, I've been through some challenging times as well, and I look back at the evolution of myself throughout those times, and I think, wow, like you can feel a difference. Like okay,
Yes.
I have a 2.5-year-old. I'm not sure if you have any nieces or nephews, but if somebody saw my son 6 months ago, they're like, wow, he's so different. He changed. He looks like this now. But when you have internal growth, some people can see it in your face. You know what I mean? They're like, man, there's
100%.
something different about you. There's an aura, or there's a change in you. I'm sure that change happened in yourself. Sometimes it's
Of course.
self-evident in myself. And I think that's a beautiful thing about life. It's like it's all about growth
Yeah.
in a sense, right?
I think kids are the one thing that'll change anybody. I have a daughter, by the way.
Oh,
So
yes. Okay, okay.
I
Uh,
do. Yeah. I don't know if you
okay,
want to go into all that. I'm happy to share
we're
though.
gonna go into that. Let's go
Let's
into that.
go.
What's that?
So,
What's that?
so
How old is she?
okay. So the reason that I speak the way that I do is because when I was very young, I had a daughter. And that was something. So I was 18 when I had her. Today I'm 36. She's 18, believe it or
Mhm.
not. So I've
18.
spent,
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
university, all that. It's like living life in reverse. A lot of my friends are sort of having kids now, and I'm
Mhm.
kind of like out the door because she's already grown and in university. So when I had that, obviously, at that time I wasn't super stable with work. I wasn't
Mhm.
super stable with the things that I thought my life was going to look like.
Mhm.
And I was put in a position of, I guess you could say, some type of adversity because it's not easy, right? It's, this, you have a young one.
Yeah.
Uh, it's hard, and especially when you're young and you don't have adequate training, and you yourself kind of feel like a kid, which I was, to be honest. And
Yeah.
that kind of at the same time when I got into HSBC, so a lot of things sort of happened to transform me. But it's, looking back, like in those moments, because again, you're living life by the minute. And when you're living it by the minute, it's almost like imagine a piece of paper filled with text. And so your whole existence is at a very surface level. You can only see a particular word. As the
Mhm.
years go on, you start to hover at a much higher level and you're able to see the whole page with all the words. And then you see the story and you're like, that makes sense. That's the reason why everything else happened the way that it did, and I've become who I was supposed to be. So, like you said, kids, breakups, financial hardships, those things are good. You could choose. You could, you know, break and bend and fold, and it's the end, or you could figure it out. And I recommend for people to figure it out, you
Wow,
know?
that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Mickey. I wasn't aware that you had a daughter now.
Yeah.
Your daughter is 18 now. What can you say?
Yeah.
Because I know children, they bring out a lot of growth in us, right? Is
Yeah.
there one key thing that, like, for example, uh, actually, I'll ask you, is there one key thing that you feel like you got more in touch with after, having a daughter with
Yeah,
yourself?
she's a girl, right? So
Yeah.
it's like it's a different feeling. You're definitely more conscious and you're having more of those conversations, but I can tie it to something else. Like I remember when she was really young and it would be bedtime, right? And when I
Mhm.
was a kid and when she was young, and I'm sure your kids, it's the same thing, dude. It's like you tell them like, hey, you need to go to bed. There's a routine in place. You got to do it.
Yeah.
Kids don't understand or have our level of consciousness. So again, it's like sales. They don't know the what's in it for me. Why is dad telling me to do this? I want to fucking run around and have fun. I don't
Yeah.
want to go to bed. It's 8 o'clock. I have
Yeah.
energy. Like this makes no sense. So it's no different in the sales world when I was kind of referring to
Mhm.
product and whatnot. And when she was really young and I'd run into these situations, she was of talking age. So this like five-ish, sixes from
Mhm.
six, from what I remember. I had to learn, for lack of a better word, like to manipulate a little bit,
I
but
understand.
not in a
Compromise.
yeah, like I got to start explaining, like, hey, yeah, like again, it's all in the delivery and how your voice, like it's all sales. It's like,
So this
hey,
is how you built your sales skills. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
pretty
It's a
much.
tough
Yeah.
cookie there, right?
Yeah. I'm like, listen, I'm like, and you got to say it with a
Negotiation.
smile. Total. That's why I'm a master negotiator. But I was like, I'm sitting with her and I'm like thinking in my head, because my natural reaction, right? Frustration hits every
Yeah.
parent and you want to react. Don't react. You have to create space. You have to respond. And so again, I didn't perfect this at the beginning, but after time, I'd kind of realize I'd be like, hey, you know what? Let me try some different shit. So I'd be like, that's cool. You want to stay up because you got to make the decision theirs. That's the key. That way you got to lead them. You can't decide for them.
Yes.
People want to feel power, right? That's a
Yeah.
human trait. So it was like, hey, no problem. You could stay up all night, but guess what? You're going to be tired tomorrow for show and tell, and that really cool toy that you want to take in. You're not going to have a chance to talk about it the way you want to. You're going to be sleeping. The kids are going to think you're weird. Like you start, you know, and you're like, but if you go to sleep now, maximum energy, the kids are going to want to talk. You're going to have a lot of people to talk to. You're going to be tired. You got this
Mhm.
kick-ass toy. You're going to be tired, if you don't have the sleep that you need now. And you see them sort of think about this, and they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm in. And that's how so it's all that's life, man.
100%. I do the reverse psychology of my son already, and I thought I was pretty smart by doing it. He won't
Yeah,
eat his food sometimes, and I'm like, looks like Dada's gonna eat Jahan's
yeah,
food today.
yeah,
And he's
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, oh, what? No,
I
I'm gonna
can't
eat it.
believe it. Yeah, this food's so good. Oh my God, thank you so much. That's life, because I think it's interesting. It's such an interesting topic that I know we could ramble on. I'll try to keep it as tight as possible. But
Sure.
basically, I think people grow up with these various paradigms, and
Mhm.
no is such a natural answer for people because it requires no commitment. There's no commitment. No, fuck off. No, that means I'm not involved. I'm
Yeah.
not committed. I don't have to do nothing, which is better than something, depending on what the proposition is. But as you get older, you start to realize that the best and most effective way with people is to show them the way. But because if I say, hey, do this because I want you to do it, you're not going to do it unless I
No,
force you to do it, which I don't want to because it's not real. So you got to
100%.
learn how to maneuver a bit,
You got to play the dance, right?
100%.
All right, so let's switch gears here. Let's switch
Sure.
gears over to movies. You're a pretty big movie buff, and from what I remember, excuse me, I think you like the movie The Godfather.
I mean, I like it. No, the top movie that I mentioned last
Okay,
time was Good Will Hunting, but there's so
Good
many.
Will Hunting. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember this quote in The Godfather? The contempt of money is another trick of the rich to keep the poor without it. Do you remember that?
I do actually, and that's a really good quote.
What does that What does that mean to you? How can you break that down? And how's that applied to today's society? Because this movie was from the 70s and 60s, right?
Right, and to me, at the end of the day, I think that basically, to me, it implies that again, it's if you don't want people doing certain things, for example, like if the rich are making money and they know that money's of value and they want more of it and they want you to have less of it, they're going to frame it in a way in which you're not going to want to get it yourself. It goes back to
Mhm.
this whole psychological stuff. And so I think this is why essentially that quote makes sense, because if any other way it was spun, people would want money, right?
Mhm.
They'd want to go out there and make money because everybody wants it. So the contempt of money is also a way for, I think, people that, again, it's the no commitment thing.
Like
If I hate
universal income.
money, yeah, like if I hate money, for example, like if I have contempt of money, if I'm not, if I think that's not a good thing, it also puts me in control of the destiny that's associated with my life. So for example, if I say no to things more than I say yes, that then means I have control and there's no
Mhm.
fear of loss, for example, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good point there. Speaking of movies, is there any movie that you like throughout the years that you feel like you kind of think about, or there's some specific quote from a movie that you kind of draw upon at times?
Oh man, there's so many.
Oh,
There's so
I
many.
can
So
only imagine.
yeah, yeah,
Wolf of Wall Street or Wall Street
of
Behind
course.
You or anything you can think of.
Yeah, let's go with Wall Street Behind Me. It's funny.
Sure.
I thought it was a great movie, in different ways, but that Gordon Gekko speech where he says
Yeah.
greed is good.
Yeah.
That famous town hall he gives, and he's painted as this villain, and then he comes out and he says greed is good. Greed is good, but that ties to a broader, bigger concept, in my opinion,
Mhm.
which is basically that in reality, if you say that greed is good, it seems very selfish, right? And people are always thinking that being selfish is bad. But I think you as an individual, when you take care of your needs and you become the best version of yourself, which requires being selfish, the truth is you're going to become a better person, which then kind of makes it selfless. So go
Mhm.
out there, be greedy with your time, be greedy with your money, become the best version of yourself, carry and continue to have empathy matched and coupled with strong boundaries. And I think that combination of three things, greed, meaning like ambition, drive, hustle, empathy, because we all
Mhm.
live here together at the end of the day. We're all the same. We all want the same shit. And boundaries, because some people prey on the empathy part. So you want to make sure that you're still protecting yourself and you'll be fine, in my opinion.
See, all right, Mickey, I got another question for you. All right. What comes to your mind when you hear the term "you will own nothing and be happy"?
uh,
That's a loaded question.
yeah, yeah. Are you sure you want to go there? I mean, yeah,
Let's go there. Let's not go too deep, but let's
yeah,
go there. And you know what? Just to touch upon that,
yeah.
does that apply to everyone?
Yes and no. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think it's as controversial of a statement as one would think. Yes,
Mhm.
could that be something that ends up materializing in and around the year 2030? For sure. Does that relate to a conspiracy necessarily? Not ruling it out, the World Economic Forum thing.
Mhm.
But if you just look at the trend of things, like I posted something today that showed the average age of house ownership, like for somebody to buy a house.
Yep.
In the last 30 years, it's increased by 100%. Like it's literally doubled.
It's like
And so
50, right? Or something 55. What was it?
like 49 or something. And so if this
Yes.
journey continues, if things continue to go at this trend line that we currently have, yeah, is it plausible by 2030, 2040 that people will not own anything? Absolutely. But that speaks to things like fiat currency, the destruction of the value within it, and the fact that we've sort of been living off of credit mostly, for a long time. And
Mhm.
like everything else, it's cyclical and eventually it runs its course. And the question is what does the future look like, and are we going to live in a world where maybe ownership won't be the way to go? I think people are going to try to get into things like freedom. So if I don't have attachments to things like a property or things that
Mhm.
sort of keep me rooted in one geographic location,
Yep.
maybe we're going to have a life of experience, and maybe we're going to pay subscriptions to different opportunities or whatever the case is. That could be
Right.
possible, you know
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think you're right here. Just losing you on the screen here right now. Just give
are
me one
you?
second. Yes.
Yeah,
I can hear you just here in the corner here. 1 second. Okay.
sure.
So no worries. All right. So, because you know what, that phrase a couple of years ago, uh, when I heard it repeatedly, it kind of like ran chills through me,
Yeah.
thinking, you'll own nothing and be happy. What the hell does that mean? Right. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, I'm not going to own a house or a car. I'm just going to be happy. I'm like, it's going to, like, well, how would I be happy? Right. And it
yeah.
does make sense, I guess, if you're, like, I mean, renting and owning, I think if you want to rent and it works up for your lifestyle, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if you're investing in other ways, that's great. I think there's another uh, we both know who Grant Cardone is, right? And
Of
Grant
course.
Cardone always says, don't buy anything, build your business, and then buy a house. My mind was always in the sense from my family and my parents and culturally is like, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's in a lot of people's minds, but it was pretty smart how Grant Cardone explained it. He explained that buy where you buy where it makes sense, and then rent where you want to live, so to
Yeah.
speak, right? So that way
Yeah.
you can basically have freedom to move around, but invest in your business, which is yourself. Invest in
Yeah.
yourself to you're at a
Yeah.
place where you're like, you know what? Now I'm ready to buy where I want to live, rather
Exactly.
than always just overshooting yourself and then not being able to have a fulfilled life. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually totally agree with it, and I'll tell you why. Like, yeah, maybe once upon a time, like I'll give you an example. When my parents came to Canada, the first house that they bought a few years into us living in, like not a few years, maybe 10 years or so living in the country, they bought their first house with 30 grand. That was the down payment, and that money was actually gifted from my grandmother, so it's like
That's big money back then.
huge, right? They bought their
Huge.
first house, I think it was like 99 or something, and
Yeah.
1999. And I think the cost was like 240 grand, and it was a detached house. I mean, it wasn't the biggest, but the
Mhm.
point is these goals and aspirations were pretty achievable. It wasn't like super far-fetched, nor did it create an overwhelming like amount of pressure in their budget. It was sort of normal. Like we could still travel as a family. We definitely didn't struggle with like groceries. Life was okay. It was pretty middle class. But I think, like, to your point with this whole you'll own nothing and be happy shit, yeah, the middle class is evaporating right in front of our eyes and has only accelerated after COVID. And that is scary because it's the foundation of society. The middle class is the foundation. And to Grant Cardone's point, I think what he means is when there's other opportunities that have better intrinsic value, for instance, where you can invest in something and
Mhm.
generate cash flow or some cash flow positivity that'll sort of subsidize your life and give you the freedom of mobility and take away pressure. Yeah, that could make sense compared to, say, buying a house that you might love, but it's going to keep you as a prisoner to that property. To me, that
Mm,
does, like, what's the point? I've had clients like that, by the way. And I think,
yeah.
like you said, your parents instilled that Canada's a country of immigrants. Like I'm one. I think
Mhm.
you are
I
too.
am as well.
Yeah.
East Indian.
So
What's your background again, if you mind me asking?
I'm Russian Jewish.
Okay,
Yes.
so
So
we're the same.
pretty same
We're
idea, right?
pretty
We
much
came
similar
here.
then.
Yeah, came here
Same values,
and
right?
same values. And I heard the same shit. You got to own, you got to own, you got to buy, you got to buy. And I get it because
Yeah,
maybe back home at a time, like my parents grew up in the Soviet Union, they
yeah,
couldn't own. It was hard. It was like a difficult thing to achieve. But again, we're in a different world today. I think you want to create the best life for yourself. Obviously, had we, buying assets 10, 15 years ago, fantastic. We would have been super rich off that. Many have gone rich off that, but also at the same time, somebody looking at the market today, I don't know, man. Like I have clients that are
mhm.
prisoners to their properties, and it's kind of like, is it worth it? You can
Yeah.
rent
You
this.
can't do it. You can't do anything. You're trapped. You're almost like the term they use, landlocked. You're locked into your property, right? Can't
Yeah,
do anything. I mean,
yeah,
that's interesting. You mentioned that you're from Russia as well, and Soviet Union. Your parents remember a time other than capitalism, right?
yeah.
So, I
I know.
mean, how
Funny.
do they feel about capitalism?
They fucking love it, dude.
They do, right?
Yeah, of course, they risked their lives, and
To
that's why
come here.
to come here. But then I see homegrown Canadians that love virtue signaling and shitting on capitalism, saying it's the epitome of evil, when in reality they have no idea what it's like to live in a communal fucking house where there's one bathroom for 200 people. Like we should be grateful for what we have, but we should also equal call out the issues and the things that are happening because our country, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'd agree, is in rapid decline,
Yeah,
politically and otherwise.
I think we're facing some challenging times for the last few years, and the future is pretty uncertain. That being said, I think there's a lot of people that are actually, standing up now and speaking and letting their voices being heard. I think these platforms right here are a beautiful way to do that. Guys like yourself, guys like myself, that can, say, hey, we also feel like we want to help all people, and by doing X, Y, Z, rather than the current ways that are being offered, and especially the last couple of years, right? I
Mm,
think people are more and more than ever looking for direction and strong people to guide them rather than kind of being coddled, so to
yeah,
speak. And
absolutely.
I can't do that anymore. I got a kid, and you have a daughter
Yeah,
as well, and
yeah,
there's something that we got to leave a legacy for them. So there's something that they can pass on as well, right?
absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you on that.
All right. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get you in the full screen here today, but now let's talk a little bit further about capitalism, since we'll end off the podcast there next 5 minutes. But let's talk about capitalism, because we can go on for hours, and we're going to do this again, bro,
Yeah,
because
of
I love
course.
chatting with you. But
Likewise.
and I find in Western culture, for many people that haven't traveled to other countries, like I've been to India, parts of Europe, and most people are dying to get here. Like I
Of
have
course.
relatives in India right now, and they've been trying for several years, and they can only imagine a day that they literally put their feet on the ground and they're gonna say, "Thank you, God." And
Yeah,
people here are saying, "Oh, this is terrible. That's terrible." It's like, I mean, let's look around. Let's be honest, Mickey. Where in the world would you rather be? Maybe the States. They got their
yeah,
challenges,
but
but I
yeah,
mean,
exactly. It's
it's
funny you
like,
bring this up. I had this exact conversation today
yeah,
with a buddy of mine who I thought for sure would be in full agreement with me. The casual question these days amongst Canadians is like, "Hey, have you given thought to getting the hell out?" And most of the time, it's like, "Yeah, 100%." Da, da, da. But this guy today kind of opened my mind. He's like, he's an immigrant too, so
mhm,
he's like, dude, Canada gave me a beautiful life. He's like, I make money. He had twins, he had kids, and they
oh
had
wow,
issues giving birth.
hmm,
Sometimes that happens with twins, but like
absolutely,
healthcare sucks for the relatively unserious things. But when it's kind of serious, like the healthcare system does provide. Is it perfect? No. Would
hmm,
I rather see a two-tier system? Yes. But at the end of the day, I think we do need to be grateful for a lot. I do think that I would definitely prefer the Western world than what's going on in the East without question. Like I wouldn't want to live in Russia. I wouldn't
yeah,
want to live in Eastern Europe. I wouldn't want to live in China. I wouldn't want to live in those places because truthfully speaking, if you, again, relative or not, if you said some of the stuff that we say openly on social media platforms and just like broadcasting it the way that we do, we'd end up in prison over there.
yeah.
You'd be considered an enemy of the state. You wouldn't be considered based. You wouldn't be considered cool.
Based.
Yeah, you're not
No
based.
cap. Right?
Yeah, you're fucking in prison. So
Yeah.
it's twofold. On one, yes, be grateful and remember it for its potential. It's like being in a relationship. You start dating someone, they're awesome. A couple months into it, they become shitty.
The
Try to,
honeymoon phase.
yeah, it's fading. So we should still say, hey, I'm grateful to have somebody, but I also want to get back to those days that we had because where it's going right now, I don't think it's going in a good direction. And that's
Oh,
okay. You could say that.
totally. I mean, I think gratitude is a really important thing for a lot of people to have. And I think, especially in this day and age, we've, like you said, seen some challenging times, but, you know, we have one canvas and that's the world. We got to
Yeah.
choose where we want to play this game that's been set out for us. I like my chances here, and I know you like your chances here
Yeah.
as well. So we're going to continue to play the quote unquote game and to provide that value. Miki, as we're wrapping up here, any upcoming events or ventures that you're excited about that you want to let people know about and they should be following closely on?
To be honest with you, I'm on a day by day. I have a lot of ideas I'm toying with, whether it's Twitter Spaces, podcasting on a more like a reoccurring basis. My best suggestion: just follow me on Instagram or any social platform. So on Instagram, it's at sense2.dollars, and then on Twitter, for example, or currently known as X, it's at sense2_dollars, I believe. Give me a follow and I keep people posted on what I'm up to and definitely working on some cool stuff in the background for sure.
Beautiful, brother. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing the
Of course.
time today.
Of
And you know
course.
what? Mickey's been mastering his life for a number of years. It's not a daily thing. It's not, it doesn't happen in a day. It happens over time. And I love the way you've been adding that value. You've inspired me to also come outside of the box and actually speak openly. So I appreciate you, brother. Love you, man.
Of course.
Thank you for
Love you
giving me
too,
your time
bro.
today. We'll do
My
it again
pleasure.
soon.
I can't wait. Thanks, buddy. I
Thanks, bro.
appreciate you.
Take
Take
care.
care, buddy. You too.
Bye.